band in Alberta signed a Treaty 6 adhesion in 1878. Not long after, members were pressured to sell their valuable lands. In 1958, the band was enfranchised, and Canada no longer recognized their status as First Peoples. Now, they are fighting to once again be recognized as a nation. APTN's Chris Stewart has the story.
Michel First Nation consisted of 40 square miles of land just northwest of Edmonton. Chief Michel Callahoo's band had expectations of cows and plows after signing on to Treaty 6. They did not receive what was promised. In the early 1900s, the band was pressured to sell parts of their land by the government. They needed to buy farming equipment so they would not starve. Over the decades, more and more land was sold by members at very low prices. Many members sold their land and became enfranchised. This meant they no longer had Indian status under the Indian Act, and then were allowed to vote, attend post-secondary education, and not have their children attend residential schools. In 1958, the entire population of the Michel First Nation was enfranchised. All the original land was gone. Brandy Callahoo is president of the Descendants of Michel First Nation Association. They represent status and non-status members of Michel First Nation.
It was forced. It was coercion at its finest. I mean, they were starved off the land. Many of the ancestors, many of the people that lived there, they were excellent farmers. And, you know, Michel, he signed treaty, and they were promised certain things that were never delivered. So the land was kind of sold off chunk by chunk, even as early as the early 1900s. Just because they were starving, they weren't getting the farming equipment that they were promised.
In 1985, Bill C-31 enabled many Michel First Nations to regain their status.
This is all Michel land at one time. Look how beautiful it is, and the big, huge houses that sit on top of the hills. There's another mansion over there.
Their former home is worth billions in gravel deposits and oil. Many who bought or were given their land are now very wealthy. Rosalind Callahoo was chief of Michel First Nation for over a decade. She represents the Michel Band Unity Group. Her grandfather gave up his status and became enfranchised. She says he did not want his children going to residential schools.
It's been 91 years since my grandfather left the reserve, since the first group. It's been 61 years since the band was enfranchised. We've lost our history, we've lost our culture, we've lost our community.
There are now 4 groups saying they represent Michel First Nation: the Descendants of Michel First Nation, Friends of Michel Society, Michel First Nation Corporation, and the Michel Band Unity Group. Brandy says 3 groups, not including the Unity Group, are representing status and non-status members. Rosalind only wants status members to be represented. They have gone to arbitration with the federal government to see who will have the voice to speak on behalf of Michel First Nation.
We're tired of Canada giving us the runaround. And historically, the Michel Band, what has happened to them, I believe is the most detrimental, next to the residential school, of Indian people, of our people.
Both Brandy Callahoo and Rosalind Callahoo want restitution for Michel First Nation to be reinstated.
I would love to see the band reinstated. I would love to see us build a community together, one that's going to be beneficial for all of us. You know, we still have some elders. We've got a lot of youth. I have grandchildren myself. I'd love for people to be able to come home and connect and reestablish our connections and our traditions and learn our languages.
Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Edmonton.